Hey, good evening, everybody. This is Conant Show, and it's Wednesday, September 11th, 2019. And I guess I can't say 9/11 without acknowledging the big tragedy that befell New York City in, was that 2001?
Yes.
A space odyssey of sorts, and my heart goes out to all the families that have survived losses that day, and it haunts us to this day, and for a lot of reasons, but that's not what this show is about tonight. But I do want to acknowledge that fact. And also, I was thinking over the last couple of shows, the functioning of new, or at least newer cameras and everything seemingly cleaner and better. I have to acknowledge that and thank the town council or board, or is Bill McKenna still with us on the town board? Yeah, right? He's still our selectman? Or supervisor. This is all these different titles for our local officials here. I get them confused. So thanks, Bill. There has got to be acknowledgement for the good stuff in the world, and it's nice to see our studio being loved and cared for, and so on. And all the people that are behind that, I'd like to send some gratitude out to them as well. So anybody out there that's been calling the town and saying, fix the studio for us, and when we were asking you to, well, thank you for that too, because apparently it's been heard, and that's a groovy thing. Also, I'd like to thank Steve Romine for sponsoring my show, and for Paula Gloria for teching for us tonight, as she has done for many shows, and it's always a lovely, lovely experience to have Paula Gloria on board and teching for these programs. So now, a little bit different show tonight than what we've been doing, and in the spirit of community and local gifts and talents, Barbara Graff is here with us tonight, and we have just met literally moments ago, and we don't know each other at all. We've never met. Well, we've met now, and so we're just getting acquainted. So we're going to get acquainted on air and talk about her artwork. And Paula, being the good scout that she is, went out to Oriole 9, and has some footage for us to view. It's on air now. And there's it looks like, is that Lori? Is that I think okay, there's some people here. And here's some artwork on the walls here that Barbara has composed. And and so I'm just now seeing this for the first time. I'm going to have to go over there and see it in person, because it's always better to see it in person. So everybody get out to Oriole 9 and have breakfast and look at some groovy artwork. That's some.
Come to the opening on Saturday, 4 to 6.
The opening is yet to come.
The 14th.
Okay, so Saturday the 14th from 4 to 6 is the opening. My gosh, is that a painting? Is that difficult to roll back, or will you come back?
It's only 3 minutes. We can go back one by one as she talks.
Okay. All right. Well, that's the menu. That's a beautiful piece. So it's kind of like sculpture and a wall hanging. Okay. All right.
Do you like it, Barbara, what I did?
Yes. very, very
Do it
nice.
quickly.
I'm grateful for your appreciation of my work.
Well, we're community here.
Okay.
There's Joe. Can you come, George, 4 to 6?
I can probably, squeak away. I'm working Saturday. I work, is what I always do, of course.
Joe's gonna come just because he likes her work. He usually doesn't do that.
Yeah. I'm really interested in seeing this up close and personal. Although your camera work is making me hungry. Yeah.
Thank the Oriole for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here comes the end.
Okay, I'm just trying to take in as much as I can here. Oh, well, there's that. Now that's a detail of the image that I was interested in earlier, when that roll back was going through. So what piece is that?
That piece is Cher.
That's Cher.
Yes, that's Cher, and it's three-dimensional.
Okay.
The face is three-dimensional. Everything else is painted.
Okay, so the body is painted,
Body is painted.
and then you have a
um,
three-dimensional.
Mask, and her hair
That's far out.
is all hand beaded. All of her hair is hand beaded.
Hand beaded.
Yes.
So there's beads on the hairs?
No, it's done with string and beads.
Okay.
And the hair alone took 3 months to do.
Yeah, I believe.
I mean, I do beadwork, and I'm trying to understand what you're telling me here. So each thread is a hair
Yes.
with beads
Right,
all the way up.
right.
Far out. That's a lot of stringing.
Yes.
Yeah, I know that. I know how to do that.
Well,
That's why he appreciates it.
Yeah. Okay. So that's like multimedia, would you say?
yes, it is, or mixed media.
Mixed media.
I am a mannequin makeup artist as well, and I worked for actually a top-of-the-line mannequin company after I graduated college. And I was very fortunate to work for this company. They did mannequins from real-life people. They did Twiggy before Twiggy was famous, and Cher is another face that they did. So I stayed with the company for many years, freelanced for them, and I was lucky enough to get a Cher mask from FIT, from
Oh,
a friend of mine.
wow.
So I was able to use it in my painting.
Does Cher care?
I think she would probably be happy. I don't know that she knows about this.
Yeah, I wonder. I just don't know if her face is copyrighted.
Well,
That's really far out. I mean, okay, so I just have to ask because I grew up, in a household where Twilight Zone was popular, and there's a famous Twilight Zone where the mannequins come alive.
Come alive.
And that's
I've seen
that's
that.
actually a short story that was read. I happened to hear this short story that was read on public radio, I guess WAMC or something, during Story Hour or one of their shows. I don't know the name of the show. This is about 3 years ago, and it was from the 1930s. The story was about a mannequin that comes alive and falls in love and doesn't want to go back. And
some of those mannequins.
So I was just
that
gonna ask
could
you,
possibly
did
be
ever-
from the company. The company was started by a Jewish woman born in Africa, and she started her company when women really weren't working, in the 50s.
Oh yeah,
And
sure.
it was incredible what she did. She ended up making what they called the Rolls-Royce of the mannequin industry, her company, using all live models. And she had a gift for finding those models. She would find them on the subway and get them to pose.
So I have to ask you this one. when I work on something, and it almost doesn't matter what it is. I could be, you know, working on my piano on a piece of music or on an oil painting or a sculpture or whatever, and I'll talk to my work. I'll talk. So did you talk to the mannequins?
I do.
That's great.
And the good news is they don't talk back.
They don't talk about, okay. That's
But I do talk to them, yes, I do.
You know, all right, so this is a funny, this must be the creative mind going, because I play a little game, you know, like when I sit down at the piano and I've had a long day or whatever, and I just, my mind has got nothing going on in it, and, which isn't often, but it happens. So what I'll do is I'll play a note, and then it'll want to go somewhere.
Right.
And so I have to find the note that it wants to go to, or I'll play a chord, and it'll want to go to another chord, but I have, you know, where does it want to go? And the funny thing is about this little thing that I do, you know, game or whatever, I don't know how you, creative process, is that I could play the same chord, but on a different day, it'll want to go somewhere else.
That's interesting. I mean, I sort of paint similar to that. I have an idea, and I've got my great idea, and I start working on it, and then I get to a certain point and I say, well, what I thought was going to work isn't going to work. I want to go somewhere else. And that actually happened with the Cher painting.
Okay.
I very much wanted to have her in a white tiled background. I worked on the tiles, they came out wonderfully. And when I got all finished, I noticed that she looked like she was standing in a bathroom. And I said, that's not going to work. That is not going to work.
No, yeah.
I tried coloring the tiles to no avail. So I ended up finding this displaced string that you can see hanging in front of the painting.
Uh-huh.
And I put a border of it, and each of those strings is hand painted with gesso because the material was actually tan.
This one, is it? Or just share?
The Cher, yeah.
And then I put Swarovski crystals in various places on it.
Oh, I know what those are.
So then it worked.
I have a chandelier at home.
Do you?
That's Swarovski crystals from the 1920s, I think.
Wow, that must be fun to clean.
I don't clean
You
it.
don't clean it. I don't blame you.
It's actually a small chandelier. Chandeliers are an interesting subject all in of themselves. I have to do some studying on those. They've been with us for a long time, and they throw light like nobody's business. They take a little bit of light, and all those crystals, the real crystals, really grab the light and throw it around the room. And
Well, if you do any work with them, I actually have quite a few crystals from some nice chandeliers that I got from one of the manikin shows.
Well,
we did.
we'll have to talk.
Yes.
Okay. There it is. That is just far out. That's all I can say. I mean, I don't recognize it as Cher. It's
Oh, really?
to me that it has such its own personality. It's such a fabulous piece you've got there.
Well, thank you.
And the illusion of three-dimensional relief is really carried in your painting. It really is. I mean, I'm pretty impressed by that. So let me just ask. So you went to school for art, or how?
I
that?
did.
You did.
I majored in fine art and art history, and after graduating, went looking for an art job, and I walked into the mannequin industry.
Makeup
Yeah.
artist for mannequins.
And and the makeups are all done with oils. It's like portrait painting.
Indeed.
And I
Wow.
love painting faces. I just, these are not masks. You can say I
No.
love painting faces. And I'm actually working on a project now called Faces and Phases, where I am using mannequins, making characters out of them to interact with the artwork.
Wow.
And we've done
That's
3
far
shows
out.
so far, and I'm trying to build that to have it be a retrospective.
There's a local fellow,
Mhm.
Hogan Camp. is his last name. I think it might be
I think that's
Mark. I'm not sure, but he had, it was a famous case where 5 young men beat him to an inch of his life, and he was brain damaged as a result of that. And as he tells his own story, he premiered his movie. He made a movie here, but he was a terrible drinker and depressed, but an incredible artist. I mean, just a natural born,
Did Upstate Movies
Yes,
do a
we did
film of
show
him?
that, yes.
I've heard of that.
and
I wanted to
Marwin
see-
Call
Yeah.
was the name of the film, and Hollywood's picked it up, and Hollywood made a version of the movie.
Oh, great.
But I'm very fond of the documentary that was done here locally with local resources, and part of his recovery process from the brain damage is he got the idea of photographing Barbie dolls in World War II scenes. So he imagined this town, and all of the characters are populated by Barbie dolls and G.I. Joe dolls and stuff like this, and all miniature. He would build the whole village in miniature.
Right.
But he would take a lot of the photography, like he would use
Right.
a real stream, so the scale would be mixed.
Yeah.
And the weird thing is it just
It
works.
works.
It just works. So it's really something. And the reason you reminded me of that is this is what he was doing on a miniature level.
That's amazing.
It's
yeah.
similar to what you were painting the faces and of these mannequins.
Mhm.
Well, he would take people who were near, like his therapist, the
Mhm.
nurse, the therapist, or his lawyer or his doctor. He brought them into the story
And-
and would take a doll and paint them up as that person,
person.
and dress them as that person, and it was
That's
kind of
pretty
spooky.
good,
I mean, it was
yeah.
he really captured the likenesses, and to think that you could really capture the likeness of somebody
Mhm.
on a doll, 8-inch
Right.
doll, is tremendously weird and wonderful at the same time. But he says these guys nearly killed him, but they saved him at the same
At the
time.
same time. Well, that's a wonderfully, very difficult positive attitude
Wow.
on his point.
And
Amazing.
how?
Yeah.
And how?
Yeah.
So
Give him a lot of credit for that.
So, I guess when I'm kind of going towards the thought that I have a certain background, and one of the things that I discovered is in many native traditional cultures, the artists and the musicians were also the healers.
Hmm.
So what do you think about that? Did you ever see your art as a healing? Craft?
I do. Not only for myself, but for some people, it all depends on who sees it and how well they connect to it.
Uh-huh.
I mean, because people connect to the art on different, I don't really like to use the term levels, because I don't mean to make one any better than the other. I mean, they just react to it, and it either fills them up in a universal way or they see a part of it. And I think for me, if I go to an art exhibit and I find a piece that makes my arms tingle and I can feel it all in my body, I feel that's an amazing connection. And in that way, that's a healing, because it's spiritually uplifting.
Uh-huh.
I feel joy if I see a piece that I can really connect to. And fortunately for me, I have had exhibits where people do come in and connect, and they come and thank me, even if they can't buy. But it's not
It's not always
it's not
money.
about that. No.
Not always.
If
I
I
mean,
can
it
have
helps.
some, yeah, it helps for sure. But if
It
I can have
helps.
somebody come in and be overjoyed and uplifted because of something that they saw, that's everything to me. That's what it's all about in many ways.
I
It's
mean,
communication.
when I see, what little I've seen, in the snippet here that Paul has put together for us, it strikes me as a very joyous kind of artwork.
Mm-hmm.
The cat the orange cat
Yeah,
image.
that's Samuel T. Johnson.
Yeah, you know, yeah, cats are, you know, curious creatures indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my early art, I would say the first 10 years, that was a turbulent time in my life. You know, in my 20s,
I think
struggling with
I
relationships.
can relate to that.
Yeah, and very painful time. And I think if you see enough of my art, you can see there's different styles.
Absolutely.
I kind of painted my way through the pain, trying to find the positive.
Yeah.
So that's kind of healing to do that. Now, you know, I'm older, and it's a lot of the things that may have seemed painful then, I look back at.
That's an interesting piece.
That's winter.
Symbolic of all kinds of things going on.
Yeah.
Got some intense symbology going on there.
That piece is Winter Stands Alone. And
Winner?
Winter stands
Stands
alone.
alone.
And it's if you get the opportunity to see it closely, you'll see that it's a chessboard. And there's the queen, who's the feminine force, and there's the king, who's the masculine force.
There we go. Yeah.
And then, in my interpretation of it, and I don't mean to, because everybody needs to have their own interpretation, but when I get through with this, I look at it and I go, wow, okay. Now what does some of this mean? And the winner is in the middle. And the winner is kind of androgynous. So for me personally, that painting is about the female-male forces interacting. And it would be really nice to have good communication. And in my mind, if there's a winner, does the winner really win?
That's an interesting thought.
And what do you win?
Yeah, I don't even know where to go with that. See this work here is, to me, it's like almost like a triptych. I see.
It is.
It's very enigmatic. I mean, the symbology that I'm picking up, you know, is the cats are highly revered in ancient Egypt,
Mhm.
as far as we know, and then the duality of the white and the black,
Right.
and of course, you know, a chess game is
Mhm.
a war.
Right.
It's about winning and losing.
Mhm.
And it's a very, you know, curious juxtaposition. You got the black cat, the white cat, and so why cats? I have to ask.
Well,
I'm curious.
that is something that happens that I don't necessarily have the answer to.
Okay, great answer. Yeah.
I knew I wanted to do a triptych. I knew I wanted to have some characters on the side. And it just came to me. It happens. And then that's why sometimes when you finish a painting, and if you are creative and you finish something you do, don't you ever look and say, did I do that?
Oh, I have dream journals like that
Yeah.
that I've come back to 20 years later, and like, yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
wow, I actually, you know, captured that and wrote that down. And,
Right.
But my artwork is different for me because maybe I'm lazy, but I'm not. My visual arts kind of creative process is more. I get a vision, and then it'll bother me until I do something with the vision. You know, so if it's a powerful enough vision, then I will draw a drawing, and if that's not enough, then I'll do a painting. So that's kind of how that goes. And I don't get a real vision, like, you know, maybe once in 10 years
Mhm.
that drives me back to the paints, because I don't paint professionally.
But actually, that's okay. Because you could come up with something fabulous doing that. It doesn't have to be every day, all day, you know?
But yeah, The message though, or what the imagery, the surprise element that you're talking about, I was going to say that I'm not really surprised because I had the vision, but then in the completion of some of my paintings, I look at it and I go, okay, I didn't expect that
Right.
thought communicated or that imagery to pop up the way it did, or so yeah. In answer to your question, yeah, you're right. Yeah, and I do surprise myself with that.
I think what happens when I paint is it's a meditative process all along.
Oh yeah.
And I don't paint saying, okay, I'm going to put this here because this means this. I'm going to do this because this means this. I get an inspiration and I start working and things happen. And the painting for me has to work. The painting is is what's being born.
Right.
It has to work. And I just keep
There's the
working
idea,
at it until it
then
does.
there's executing the idea,
Right.
and does it work or not? It's like, where does the note want to go?
Right.
Yeah.
But like what you were saying, yes.
Yeah. Oh boy, I relate to that. So you were schooled here at Onteora
Yes.
in the formative years, and
Right.
we had just before we went on air, we spent a few minutes getting acquainted while sound checking, and you were relating something that was kind of interesting. You said that in those days Onteora had a tremendous humanities course,
Yes.
and I think it's important for our viewers to hear about this, because why? I don't know.
Well,
What's your thought? What's your thought when you were talking about a great humanities course? Something must have triggered your.
because I have to say,
thought.
I'll bring in put a little history. The first time I ever saw slides of Van Gogh's work,
Uh-huh.
I was 13 and I was in a 7th grade class at Woodstock School. And I saw his painting, if you're familiar with it, The Crows of the Field, the last painting he did before he supposedly shot himself.
Yes.
And I was so intrigued by that. It drew me into being interested in art, even though I had always doodled but that.
So that's like his last known oil painting.
Right, and that brought me into a very serious consideration of art. And I was very fortunate that a few years later, in my senior year, I had a teacher who was passionate about the arts, painting, opera, literature, and he was brilliant.
Now this would be Onteora.
Yes, this is on tour.
Do you remember the teacher's name?
His name is Robert Carr.
Robert Carr.
And I'm actually still good friends with his wife, Gail Carr, who's a fabulous artist. She's actually my mentor. She's
Oh,
an
wow.
incredible artist. I stay in touch with her. Robert has passed away. But he would drive the students down to the Metropolitan, and he would drive us all down to either the opera or to the museum. And that's how I got exposure, because, my parents were busy. They didn't truck us down to New York City.
Yeah, I had a high school art teacher, Sharon Class, who took us down. The art students. It was really for the senior class, and I think I was maybe a freshman or a sophomore, but I was invited along. I come from a family of artists, so by the time I was in 9th grade, I was oil painting stuff that was, lifting eyebrows. But I had so much advance. 3 of my brothers were oil painters. My grandmother was an oil painter. My father was an awesome painter as well. So it's like in the DNA, I guess.
Yes.
But yeah, going down and having that experience of seeing some of this, the painting that kind of still resonates with me to this day is Joan of Arc.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know who the artist was that did it, but it was huge. I mean, and the detail and the just
Right,
compositionally and
There's-
the Renaissance era piece of work.
Well, I remember sitting on the steps there, and my dream was, I want to be here someday. It was just so amazing, and I'm so grateful that we had that opportunity.
I think we hit a couple. We hit the Guggenheim that day too. I think there was a few places that we
Yeah.
went to, but the old masters struck me the
Mhm.
hardest and the best. I mean, it was just,
Yeah, I can certainly understand,
you know,
because they're incredible.
absolutely, and talk about metaphor and allegory and you
Yeah.
know, storytelling. You know, I hadn't a clue of any of that. I was just
Yeah, you have to have a lot of background.
really impressed with the just the degree of
Yeah.
uh, proficiency and amazingness. I guess I don't know how to describe it. So, and that brings me to this thought, and that is you know, the quality of our lives today, and you know, you've lived life, and you've seen decades go by, and
Mhm.
you know, how you know, what's your feeling about the creativity of our culture? That's a nice obtuse question.
Well, you know, I think it's unfortunate to some degree that there's a lot of, say, over-the-couch paintings, decorative stuff, which is fine. I mean, it keeps people employed. I wonder, I kind of feel that there's a lot of people who don't see art or understand art. Not, I mean, it's probably a vast majority of people who aren't exposed to it. And I've known people who weren't exposed to it. I've worked with students who weren't exposed to it. And when they are, it opens up a whole new world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important. I think it's important to have exposure in the, you know, in school. I mean, I'm not sure if that's the
Well,
question you were asking.
I mean,
It ensures our well-being as a society.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna
I'm
kind
not-
of jump on that thought for a second, and that is you know, I mentioned this on this show before, but it's worth it again. You know, there was a very short time that I was involved with. I wrote a grant
Mhm.
for an art program called Native Arts and Basic Education.
Mhm.
And it was specific to New York State indigenous populations, native populations in public schools that would be provided native artists, and many of them maybe speak the language
Mhm.
and work in native materials as well as modern materials. But the criteria was that they were in a traditional vein, you know,
Right.
of their crafts, whether it's weaving or, you know, working in clay or leather or whatever it is, you know, all the different arts that there are, as well as themes, right?
That sounds
Thematically.
Great.
You know, the cultural themes in the artwork is also comes under that. So it could be a modern material, but the cultural theme
Yeah.
is involved. So it was so I had become a liaison between the reservations that I was at and New York State Department of Education, and
And how well was it received?
it was received very well.
Oh,
We won
good.
the grant, and it operated for a little while, and it was actually not a new idea.
Mhm.
It had been floated before, decades before, but you know, it's still a worthy, you know.
Oh, I think so.
Endeavor, and you know, it created certification variants so that these artists could teach in the public
Mhm.
school system, you know, with their criteria being set that they're native and they're doing their craft and they're culturally significant, and that kind of thing. So where I was going with the thought is that what I saw happen is I got involved with a huge conference in Albany, at the Albany U, sponsored by the Department of Education, and art teachers from across New York State were invited, and I got invited. I said, wow,
Good.
okay,
Great.
I'll go. This is going to be fun. And so for 4 days, you know, we're being introduced to, now I can't remember what it was like, I don't know, it was Title 80 or Title 81, or there was a name for it. It came out of California. Maybe it was a lower number. I can't remember anymore. It's just so long ago. And they were pushing this discipline-based arts education. That's what they called it. That was the fancy name. But the fancy name belied what it really was budget cutting. That's what it really was, folks. This was so funny. And for 4 days, these politicians from California were really selling hard their legislation to our state. And they were running it past all, 500, there was over 500 art teachers that participated in this thing. And finally, there's the end of the demonstrations and introductions and everything. You have the panel discussion, right? There's the big finale, the panel discussion with all the experts. And so there's about 8 or 10 of them on the stage there, and moderator, I think, was Thomas Sobel. He was at the very top of the Board of Regents. I can't remember, Commissioner of Education, I think, something like that, big name. And he was a really sweet guy. I liked him a lot. And so he was sort of like, overseeing the whole panel discussion, and it was opened up to questions. And so, everybody's asking kind of these different questions about the programs. And so what it really boiled down to, and this was what my question was, and I said, I stand up and I said, so let me get this straight, I say to the panel. I said, so what you're telling us is that the history teacher is going to teach art history, and the English teacher is going to teach aesthetics, and we don't have an art teacher anymore. We just have art class, where you're hands-on once a week with, like a substitute teacher.
And the kids are all bored, yes.
and there was a fourth element. Oh, and so you're going to their real big push about how great this idea is that they get to like eliminate the art department for the most part, except for studio art, 1 day a week of studio art. That's what they said. And so I'm calling it out just exactly as it is, but they couched it in such verbose nonsense, really. So I finally come to the last thought was I lost it now. But anyway, in that last exchange of just pointing out how, so the history teaches art history, the English teacher teaches aesthetics, and the art teacher is like pro tem. He comes once a week for studio art. Oh, right, and so we're quantifying an idiosyncratic information here. Is that right? And for you folks out there wondering what that means is what they were doing was they were. Do you all remember color forms, where you got little cutouts and you got to make an image by sticking them on? Well, this is how they were going to test to make art testable.
Right.
So aesthetics and form and everything. So you would get a cloud, you'd get a tree, you'd get a house, you'd get a this, and then you'd have to put it all together, and then you get graded on it. So when I laid it all out like that, it was like a wind hit the panel, and they all got like blown back in their seats.
Well, then good.
And then 500 art teachers started laughing and started getting up, and the backpedaling. Oh, no, it's not that. Yes. I said, well, actually, it is that.
It is.
And, so did that ever happen? I mean, you're more in touch with the art scene than I am.
Well,
what do you think?
Fortunately, it didn't happen in my experience.
Yeah.
I won't say New York, because I went to school here, I left. Hofstra was a fabulous art school when I went to it. It was awesome. Coming back, I have to say my daughter had great experience with art in Brooklyn.
Uh-huh.
She was only there for till the 4th grade. The art teachers there, they had all of the Van Gogh pictures, any artist you can imagine, female and male artists, pictures of their work all over the classroom. That's kindergarten and 1st grade. I think that's important. The kids see that, learn who those people are. They took it more serious, and I don't really want to say negative things about the schools here, but I think that the program wasn't near what it was before. I remember my daughter in elementary school here coming home and saying, "Mom, we did hot dog people in art today." And she did most of her artwork at home. She would explore and do projects at home, and incredible projects she would do. And in school she was kind of bored. So
Yeah.
I think, and I know in some schools, I have a friend who's a wonderful art teacher. He teaches in Pennsylvania. He was in display for 20 years though, and then he became an art teacher, and he's doing incredible things with the kids. So I think it's just a matter of where you are, and maybe what they tell the teachers they have to do. What rules they have to follow.
Yeah, well, I think part of the system, political thinking, is, I guess the artists have always been the provocateurs of thought.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, you have a political climate where creative thinking is not necessarily a desirable
Right.
outcome for the general population.
Yeah.
So, without getting too deep into that, kind of a miasma of a thought, what I've always supported is the idea of when they start talking budget cuts for art departments and music departments, my concern is always, well, what aspects of our intellectual development and health does the creative arts, work with, or exercise, or develop, or improve? In what way? And when you look at what we were talking about earlier, where does the note want to go? Or, that tile wall behind Cher was, no, it doesn't work. I'm going to solve that problem.
Right.
It's a problem. So now we're talking about critical thinking skills, problem
Right.
solving,
Oh, sure.
eye-hand coordination. It is a complete
Oh, yeah.
body, mind, meditation, and exercise.
But also for kids, if you're talking kids, it's also a way for them to get their emotions out if they can't talk about them.
Sure.
That's incredibly important, I think.
It's a path.
Yeah. It's a shame. I mean, I'm not sure what the reasoning is when they decide to make these cuts. You
And none of them are good, so we don't have to
Right.
go there.
No,
I'm teasing,
brought
I'm
up some
kidding.
good. No, you brought up some interesting points. I just and that I'm glad to consider. I always thought, well, they just don't think it's as important as the math and the science and the. I feel that it's all important because every student is different. Some student might lean toward math, some towards English. And what do you do with the one that leans towards art? If you're going to cut the budget.
Well, see, now I'm kind of coming at the thought in another direction. Is that as a interdisciplinary exercise, the critical thinking, problem solving part of the process. You know, some philosophies run the idea that, okay, art is this thing hanging on behind the couch.
Right.
All right. Oh, that's art. And the other side of the coin there is, well, oh, actually, the real art is in arriving. How was this image
Conceived
and executed?
and executed, yeah.
You know, so from getting, you know, I mean, every time I have a love-hate relationship with a blank canvas. Oh gosh, I love that blank canvas, and then it's
Yeah.
like,
Yes.
without a
Yeah.
vision, I see that's my bugaboo. Without a vision, I'm stuck.
Stuck,
I'm
yeah.
stuck, and I'm sitting there looking at a blank canvas and getting angry. But I love and I love having a bunch of them, you know, ready to
Right.
paint. You know, that to me is a very exciting thing. But then there's the part of like, okay, the
Just getting
studio's set
started.
up, and here I am.
Yeah.
You know, and again, without the vision, without a composition, I've got nothing to paint.
I think we all have those moments. You know,
Yeah.
I've certainly had plenty of them. When I took a course at Hofstra, and I had a wonderful teacher. She was tough. When we walked into the first class, she said, if anybody's here thinking they're going to get an A, you might as well just get up and leave, because this is no easy course. I don't give A's. And I remember being in the studio one day. She came to me, she took my canvas off, and she said, Barbara, put that down. That's not a painting. You better start over. And I liked her, because she told me the truth. And from that, she was very nonverbal in the way she taught. But she knew that I really wanted to learn, and she worked with me. And I learned from her what a painting was like when it was complete. I'm not sure that's the right way to put it, but I learned a lot from her, and I did get the A.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you put the energy in.
I put the effort, yeah.
You put the effort in
Yeah.
and the energy in.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the argument that I have for keeping arts and humanities in the school system and actually having them really well funded.
Yeah.
You know, is for the scientist, for the mathematician, for the writer or musician, you know, an artist, all of those fields of interest or disciplines are expressed in the making of art.
Mm-hmm. That's true. And that's, you know, I guess if you have to talk people into keeping it funded, you need to give those examples, you know? That's important,
Well, yeah.
you know?
Well,
'Cause sometimes they might not see those angles. They just
I know.
think,
I see. I getting into my conspiratorial mind. I think they do see those angles, and that they don't want a population that has the critical thinking skills that an artist has. And that's not, you know, artists have traditionally throughout history have been dangerous to
Okay, I
the
get you,
status
yeah.
quo. You know, to a certain element of the control paradigm. But that's a whole other thing. But in
Yeah.
terms of just you know, the spiritual part, well, that's part of it, though. You know, I mean, the church. That was the biggest employer of art,
Right.
you know, for
Yeah.
a long, long time. And, you know, if you went up against the church with your artwork, you really
You
were
were
asking for trouble.
trouble,
You
yeah.
know, the Inquisition, you never can tell when the Inquisition will show up. But anyway,
well, do you know that, I don't know if you've been to the Vatican, but the Vatican, I went to see the Sistine Chapel, and I was amazed that they had some work by Salvador Dali there. I'm like, wow, this is great that they have this here. And they had some other modern artists, I think Rualt, who I like very much. They had him there.
wow.
And I thought that was great, you know. I saw that on the way in the crowd until we got to top to look at the ceiling.
There were two famous artists that my father was acquainted with, and one was Escher
Mm-hmm.
and Dali.
Yeah, oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would say that my father's artwork was in the realm of hard to pin him down, somewhere between surrealism and cubism, but like a very subtle cubism.
The
Very-
Dali Museum in Spain is unbelievable.
I'd love to see that.
Oh my God, it's just, you go in and he's got paintings on the ceiling. He's got gold mannequins all around the building in the windows. He had a car with mannequins standing on. It's very bizarre. It's incredible how one person could do so much,
Yes,
you know. And you say your dad knew him?
I believe so. Yeah.
Wow, that's
My,
amazing.
Dad mentioned it.
Wow.
And let's see what my father passed in '85, and if he were alive today, he was born in 1910, 1911. He'd be 100 and something if he were still with us.
Yeah.
And I really wish I had known him better because he had such fabulous stories. He was a career officer in the military.
Was he?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I have to say, I was close to my dad, and the same thing. And you get so busy. I did spend as much time as I could with him, and did as much as I could for him. But I would have liked to hear more stories, and he had a lot of them. The last we moved here, and we spent the last 6 years of his life with him.
Yeah.
And I was so busy then, but I look back, and it would have been nice to just go and sit and hear more stories.
Speaking of that, we only got a few minutes left here. I think we got about 8 minutes left, and on the show tonight, my partner Laura and I looked at a property, a farm. We're looking to buy a farm.
Mhm.
I'm concerned about, food security in the coming years
Yep, I
because
hear
of the descending temperatures, not ascending. It's getting colder. We have a grand solar minimum going on, so I'm looking to do some local food production for our own community. I'm really taking it quite seriously. Ice ages suck.
Yeah.
They really do, and we're due for one. And, mainstream media is not talking about it. But anyway, we went and we looked at this farm, and the unique thing about it is that the farmhouse, the original farmhouse, is still standing, and it's from 1750. And it has never been renovated. It's in its original construction state,
Okay.
sort of.
Yeah.
And very rare you find these kinds of things. Very rare.
That's got to be a house
But
with lots of
here's the bit of
personality.
history. This is right here in Saugerties. It's not far away, right off 212. There's a sister and brother who live on property in their own little houses,
Mhm.
who the brother was born in that house. He's still alive. In a house that was still
Still.
functioning without electricity. I guess it had been electrified at some point. You can see that it had
Yeah.
been, but so they stopped habitating in the house 50 years ago. It hasn't been habitated in,
Really?
and
Yeah.
it's still in. They've
So
kept it
must-
up. So it's still got the old floors. It's got the old everything. I mean, it's old.
You should look to see if it has what the beams are up above the ceiling, because my dad's house,
All
we
hand-hewn.
renovated it. No, it was actual pine logs holding the house up
Sure.
with
sure.
the bark and everything on them.
Sure.
We were surprised.
Yeah. No, this one was clearly crafted by Dutch settlers that had skill sets like they had skills and tools, but still pretty impressive to see something that old. 2 minutes. So what I wanted to bring up is that I'd love to interview the sister and brother who are well in their 90s, because they are the last living
That would be fascinating.
and have this continuity
Uh-huh. They would give you a lot of information.
and that and history that like I said, our families are our history trees, and we don't have that anymore. And you know, my sister is now the matriarch in our family, in our family line anyway, Conant's. And my oldest brother, Joe, Jim, is the patriarch now.
Patriarch,
So it's
yeah.
my generation holds the stories, and we got like
I know.
hardly any.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of history in our family. So yeah, we got to close it up.
Okay.
And Barbara Graff, artist extraordinaire here in Woodstock, with a art opening on Saturday at Oriole 9 right here on 212 in town between 4 and 6. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right, wow, I remembered everything from the beginning of the show. That's amazing. And, you know, thanks everybody for tuning in. And
See you Saturday.
we'll
And
see you
thank you.
Saturday at the opening.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome.